The Godfather is a surefire contender for the best film ever made. Surefire contender for America's greatest film, at least. And the sequel, made 2 years later, which is partially based on the original book, is also generally rated as being one of the very best ever. Unfortunately, lightning did not strike three times, and the third and final Godfather film, the third one being in 1990, simply doesn't cut it. I don't want to sell it short because it actually is a very fine movie. It really isn't that bad. It's not as bad as people seem, as people say. Sorry. Um, it like if you compare it to the first two Godfather films, of course it's gonna fall short, obviously. But if you look at it at its own in its own merit, it's good. It is good. If you now, it's by no means a masterpiece like the first two. Even if you don't compare it to the first two, um, yeah, The Godfather Part Three, whether compared or not, it's no masterpiece. And frankly, what's the big deal? I mean, it has good acting, minus a couple of people, and it's a big homecoming for characters that we all know and love. It it is very fast paced. It isn't really all that slow. Well, it kind of is, but that's one of the trademarks in the Godfather films. So yeah, you know, what's the big deal if it's not a masterpiece or whatever? So what? Yeah, this movie came out in 1990, and there was quite a few. Well, not quite a few, but there was a couple of other gangster pictures that came out that year that really that kind of overshadowed this. The obvious one being Goodfellas, which was the most beloved film of 1990. There was also King of New York with Christopher Walken, which is the most brutal, the most the most gritty gangster film of that year. And there was also Dick Tracy and Miller's Crossing, the Joel Nathan Cohen movie. So yeah, there was quite a few different gangster films that year, and The Godfather Part Three, I would say, while it wasn't while it wasn't as good as Goodfellas, it was better than the others. Yeah, those Goodfellas, Godfather Part Three, and then whichever order you want to place the others. One reason why this movie does work to some capacity is because, as I said, it's a big homecoming. We got to know so many of these characters for about 6 hours. Like if combining the first two movies, that's about 6 hours. Um, the first time around, it's just great though with the way that Coppola reunites with the writer Mario Puzo, and yeah, it's just fun seeing all these characters reunite. It's great, and also Al Pacino does a fantastic job in this. He is brilliant. Now, okay, here's a little bit of side story. Okay, I live in suburban Ottawa, and I went into when I got out of high school. I actually got tickets to see Al Pacino when he came to the National Arts Center in the big city. So so I went there, and he was talking about he was talking about a whole bunch of different movie experiences of his, And one thing that he talked about was making the Godfather 3. And he said that his one major regret in making the Godfather 3, aside from the fact that he didn't really care for it, was his hair. I don't think Al Pacino's hair in the movie looks that bad, but it's kind of funny that the first thing that he bashed was his hairdo. And I thought that was kind of funny. And that's my little side story for the day. Um, yeah. When Al Pacino plays Michael Corleone in this, he's not as good as in the first two, uh, which is okay. But his performance comes closer to reaching his performances of the first two than the movie does as a whole, reaching the greatness of the first two. If that makes any sense. Like when Pacino did, especially when he did The Godfather Part Two, that's one of the top 10 performances of that entire decade, I think. And yeah, Pacino he does give one of the top 10 performances of 1990, I think. But the movie itself, I wouldn't call one of the top 10 films of 1990. But whatever. One downfall that the movie has, well, it's not really much of a downfall. It's a flaw, but people really overstate this. Francis Ford Coppola got his daughter Sophia to play Michael's Michael's daughter in it. Now, Sophia Coppola, she's no actress. She's not that good. But people really overstate her and say that she gave one of the worst acting performances of all time. Come on, have you seen B movies? Have you seen The Room, for instance? Sophia Coppola is Diane Keaton in comparison to some really bad things that have come out. At most, I'll say that Sofia Coppola gives one of the worst performances in a good movie ever. That's the worst I'll say about her. Andy Garcia was nominated for an Oscar for this. I would call him really the only real Oscar-worthy person that I would call in this movie would be Al Pacino. Not to say that because Al Pacino is my favorite. I honestly do think that he was the only guy that gave an Oscar level performance. Not even Andy Garcia. But this was like actually not. This wasn't even his breakout film. Like he did The Untouchables in '87. He did Black Rain in '89. Yeah, Andy Garcia was already well known. So how he was able to get an Oscar nomination, I don't know. It is surprising, however. Now the movie, I would say the biggest flaw with this is the main bulk of the story doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Okay, so the movie it opens up with the Michael's family. He's a philanthropist now. He's constantly giving money to the church, and he gets honored for it. And his family, the entire Corleone family, has been legitimized for years. We see at the beginning of the first Godfather film that Michael's plan was to completely legitimize the family within 5 years, but it doesn't end up happening. So I think that it was a kind of good move making the Godfather Part 3. Like, what happened if Michael legitimized the family? What would happen then? So yeah, that's I thought that making, but see, one reason why the Godfather Part Two worked so well was because it was really made so close to the first Godfather film that it just simply worked better for that reason. If they would have made it like, see, The Godfather Part 3 comes out 16 years after The Godfather Part 2. Whenever there's a massive gap in films releases and films makings, for that matter, they never ever turn out to be at the same caliber as the previous thing. Yeah, the Godfather Part 3 will need it to be closer. Like, I don't think the making a third Godfather film was that big of a deal. Making like showing having Godfather film where the Corleone family is legitimized, that was pretty interesting. I liked that idea, but 16 years was just simply far too long. So, yeah, the Corleone family is legitimized, as Michael had always wanted, um, and there's a couple of good subplots that are in this. Like, one thing, Michael's son Anthony wants to quit law school and focus on making it big as an opera singer. That was a pretty good subplot. I liked it, but of course, Michael he's very against that because he's an opera singer, and at least being a lawyer, um, you can pay for things. What kind of money are you going to earn trying to make it big as an opera singer? Andy Garcia plays Vincent Mancini, who is Sonny Corleone's illegitimate son, and he's been getting into a life of crime, and his arch rival is Joey Zaza, played by Joe Mantegna. So that's also a pretty cool subplot. The main bulk of the film deals with Michael being persuaded to donate some money to the Catholic Church, and there's so yeah, that part is easy to understand, but after a while things just get very convoluted, and some more things explode with the Vatican, and yeah, the like after a while the whole plot with the Vatican just gets really confusing, and the yeah, I really didn't understand barely anything of what was happening with the Vatican. If that part was easier to understand, then I would praise this film even more. Now, the first Godfather film, it was a little bit complex, but you could still follow it okay. The second Godfather film, both stories were very easy to follow, and this one, the whole plot with the Vatican was just confusing. Yeah, that was ultimately the biggest blow for me was the storyline, and I usually like movies with good storylines. That's one of my biggest go tos whenever I watch film is the story itself good, and in the Godfather Three's case, no, it isn't. The movie does have a few other flaws, like the operatic montage near the end ran on too long. As I said, Sofia Coppola, isn't that good in this. Robert Duvall should have come back, but George Hamilton plays his replacement in this, and let's face, George Hamilton's no Robert Duvall. So yeah, despite all the movie's flaws, there still is we're still able to keep a cool interest in what's happening, even though sometimes we don't understand really what's going on. We've just grown to love these characters so much, and yeah, the movie is almost 3 hours of like that's what really what they were going for. The movie, it's really never boring, which is good. So yeah, I don't want to bash this, but I'm not going to praise the hell out of it either. I'm going to give it a very suitable score, which is 3 stars out of 4.